Well, hello. I'm here with Doug to talk about the XZ Backdoor, of course, and some other stories. It's Tuesday, April 2, 2024. And so go ahead, Doug.
We're going to start with the XZ library issue, huh?
I think we should. In my opinion, that's going to be a huge story.
Oh, this is becoming a huge story. And boy, where to begin? So it turns out that there's an XZ library, and XZ is used for compression, kind of like WinZip, if you will, something along those lines, right? Is that a good way of explaining that?
Yeah, but I mean, it's used by all kinds of software. I mean, everything
Yeah.
over the web is zipped first. Things are zipped all the time. So, I mean, it's a lossless compression utility. So it's included in all sorts of operations.
Yeah, and it's used widespread. So it turns out that there was one person that was maintaining the open source. It's an open source.
Yeah.
So there was one person that was maintaining the code for this. And a few years ago, and I don't know that we know exactly how long, but somebody said, "Hey, I'd like to work on that." And they partnered together, and over time, and we're talking years, this person became trusted. And finally, the person that came up with the XZ library, who's been maintaining it, decided to retire. And they turned over control, if you will, of the XZ library to this other person. And Sam, do we know the name of the person? It's
The fake name is, I'll get it.
Oh yeah, fake name. Yeah, I guess we don't really know who it is or who they are. We just know that there's a name. Yeah, okay. So
Gia,
this exit,
Gia Chan. Gia Chan is their name, supposedly.
yeah, okay. So we don't know if that's a person, an acronym, or a group of people, but
It appears
most,
to be an acronym for a nation state actor, I would think.
yeah,
Nobody else would have the patience or resources to do this.
yeah, and we're talking years that this person or this group won the trust of this other person who is maintaining this compression library for years.
Oh, and they
So,
prepared for it.
and what?
First and prepared for it. First made minor updates, then carefully made updates to a fuzzing library so it wouldn't pick up the malware. This is
Oh,
and this
this
is a
is
plotted
brilliant.
attack. This is like the SolarWinds attack. I mean, clearly this thing was planned and executed gradually over years.
Yeah, yeah. This was not a smash and grab, if you will. This was well orchestrated. And I do know that this compression is used by Macs if you're using Homebrew, which most Mac users I don't think are, and widely in Linux. And I don't think it's used, or if it is, it's not used very much in Windows. And
Right.
yeah, you're in agreement.
Yeah,
Okay.
not in
And
Windows, and really not. It isn't any real risk, even to Mac or Linux users, because it was caught so quickly that
yeah,
it only made it into like the preliminary sort of beta test versions of things before they caught it. So almost most users are not on the cutting edge, so they won't have installed the vulnerable libraries.
yeah. And if you did install it or it has been installed, there's an uninstaller or a downgrade that's going on, and that's easily done.
Yeah.
But this is going into a group of attacks called supply chain attacks. So, and the vulnerability, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, is an SSH backdoor or a shell.
Well, that's the particular thing they did with it was add a backdoor to SSH so you could send a certificate to make an
Yep.
SSH login, and that certificate included code that would execute. So it gives you remote code execution on other people's machines.
Ah, I see. Okay, I missed that part of it.
Yeah.
But you know what? The interesting part is how this vulnerability was found.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these things, sometimes it's found just sheerly by accident. And this happened to be a Microsoft engineer who happened to notice that they were using the XZ library and it was taking half a second longer than it should. And he thought, boy, that's kind of strange. That doesn't make any sense. And as he started investigating it, he found this malware code that was injected in there.
This is unbelievable to me. I mean, computers take random amount of times to do things. I never worry about that kind of delay.
I know, but I guess if you're expecting a program to run and he wasn't, what's important to notice about or to mention about this, he was an engineer, he was a software programmer, not a security expert
Yep.
or somebody that was looking for security vulnerabilities or weaknesses.
Yeah, you just looked at the performance of his code and how fast the logging went, which is fine. I mean, I understand that's part of software development is to make your code
Yeah,
efficient, and then you worry about every little bit of time. So, but it's really impressive to dig all the way down to the root cause of things like this. That's
right,
that's good
right.
work. But
Yeah,
this, I
yeah.
think, is the most important point. I mean, this attack failed, but how many others are like this? Because this was a random fluke. So how likely is it that something like this would get caught? I think there must be 10 others that got through.
Absolutely. And is a related story. There's a company, and I haven't had enough time to research this, but they make browser plugins, and it's easy to put malware into browser plugins.
Oh, and that
Now,
happened.
it
Yeah.
yeah, so that's happening.
And
But
WordPress
if you
plugins.
and WordPress plugins, but browser plugins, people are, I think, more likely to download and install without giving a second thought, if you will. Whereas WordPress, you're more likely, I think, to question. Maybe that's my thought. But here's what's going on. Legitimate browser plugin authors are being offered large sums of money, and we're talking large sums of money to include tracking software in their plugins. So one at least one plugin author is starting to track this. And so far they've received 90 offers so far to include some kind of tracker in there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to consider the large case. One could say this is the problem with open source software. The people don't have any money, but I don't think that's fair because solar
No.
was very much the same thing a few years ago, and that was attacking a commercial product. I think this is why for the last 3 or 4 years, the whole security community I've heard has just been getting more and more and more worried about supply chain attacks.
Right.
I think it's
Yeah.
a huge vulnerability, and there just seems to be no good solution. Um,
Yeah.
how do you know all the libraries you're using? How do you really know they're all clean? And then if you did find a way to make sure they're all clean, then pretty soon they're out of date. So it just seems like a really difficult problem.
Right. 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 And yeah, there is no answer for this right now.
Oh, I know one answer. I was just teaching assembly code last night. You could be like
Yeah.
Steve Gibson and just write everything in assembler, and then you'd hardly be using any libraries. That's one way, but I don't think that'll ever be popular.
No. And can Chat GPT write assembly code?
I imagine it can. But
That'd be an interesting question, huh?
well, I haven't tried ChatGPT for this in maybe 6 months, but whenever it wrote Python code, it wouldn't run. Claude 2 is pretty good, though. And presumably GitHub Copilot is pretty good. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's an idea using AI to write stuff without using libraries. Boy, that would be, there's a thing in mathematics called an absolute proof from fundamental principles where you don't base it on anything else. And this has only been done for at least when I learned it a few decades ago, it's only been done for like 12 major theorems ever because it's so incredibly burdensome to prove everything from fundamental principles. And that's why they said mathematics, you don't really ever prove anything. You just make it sound convincing enough to convince other mathematicians. That's how it's really done.
Yeah.
But they have exactly the same problem. You base everything on other people's work that's based on other people's works. It's like a tower of Jenga blocks.
Yeah. Well, with math, don't we start with theorems
You start with
and
fundamental principles.
axioms?
That's
Yeah.
right. But you don't but you base things on things that have been many hands have built it brick by brick. And if somebody made a mistake 10 years ago, you wouldn't know.
Yeah. 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 Well, it goes back thousands of years, right?
That's
I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So, since we're talking on the subject of math, here we are in California. There's a Stanford professor. I don't know if you saw this in the news, who's advocating that algebra should not be taught in public schools anymore,
Oh,
or some variation of algebra, because it's too difficult for some students.
well, I went a few years ago to a teachers conference and they had the California Teacher of the Year there, and
Yeah,
he had determined that algebra was the turning point. When people fail algebra, they give up on learning and descend into crime and stuff. And algebra is the big stumbling block as they go forward. So he focused his entire teaching effort on teaching people algebra and made it so people could learn it. So it really is apparently where, most Americans hate math and spend the rest of their life phobic about math because of their failure to grasp algebra. My students are traumatized this way. They think they can't do math because they couldn't do algebra. And I say, just try it again as an adult. You'll find out it's not that hard. But I know why too, because it's taught in a cruel, abusive way that makes people feel stupid. So I think,
yeah.
yeah, it is. It's a big
I
issue.
Yeah, I had an incredible math instructor. That guy was wonderful. And Sam, it's been years since I was in, let's see, high school. And there was a formula, I forgot exactly what it was, an algebraic formula that I remember doing the problems in class, failing on an exam. But here we are, how old am I? 40, 50 years later. I needed to use that formula. It just happened to come up. And because I was taught so well by this instructor, I could ration through and I was able to figure it out. And I was able to cross check to make sure I was using the correct formula, the math, the logic, and everything worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I would have done that if I didn't remember that formula.
I think also I agree with Lord Rutherford, who said people
Yeah.
who don't know math do not even understand what it is to really know something. All they have is sort of opinions. Until you learn math, you don't know what it is to really understand something.
Yeah. Well, it's a universal language, right?
Yeah. And I clearly remember when my dad was sort of a con man kind of, he would always have these dirty tricks to like cheat and get to the answer by intuition without going through the equations, which is what
Yeah.
he liked to do. And so when I started teaching me algebra, it had these simple questions. And I would say, well, you don't need algebra for that. And then finally, I saw antifreeze. It was the first, I remember clearly, right, diagram on the blackboard from like 1971 when they showed me the first algebra problem that made any sense. Because if you have your radiator full of like 5% antifreeze and winter's coming and you want to get it up to 10% antifreeze, how much of that fluid do you remove and replace by pure antifreeze to get there? Now, that's something I couldn't do with intuition. You actually have to write down the equation and solve it. That's when I finally saw the value of algebra.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
See,
so, and it's extremely valuable. After that, I went into physics, differential geometry and vectors and everything is all great. But I think it's true that algebra is your first step from into abstract reasoning, where you manipulate these symbols and
yeah.
then you don't touch the real world until later. So I think it
Yeah.
is a huge step forward. Now, I certainly don't like the way it's generally taught in high school. I think the result is to traumatize kids. I would like to see it taught differently. I've even given training talks about this, how I think math should be taught. But no, as far as I can tell, none of the teachers in K through 12 I could reach cared.
Yeah.
And by the
That's
way,
been my,
this
yeah.
guy who was the teacher of the year in California, he taught in Oakland. He made this new algebra class that was much better, and the Oakland school district responded by firing him and getting rid of him because he's making the other teachers look bad. And he went to Sacramento, where they put him in charge of the math department and made him teach his technique to the other teachers. But those are the two responses to an innovator.
Yeah. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right. What's your first story?
well, mine are all much less exciting than yours. You had the
Oh,
big one there. But anyway, Rust. I've been talking a lot about Rust and memory safe languages, and Rust for years has been the number one language most wanted by developers, which I really understand because it really helps you write good code, whereas C is like a horrible, malicious minefield tricking you into writing bad code. And
yeah.
so and they said and so now they've tested at Google and they said Rust developers at Google are twice as productive as C++ teams, which should be the case because it's much easier to write good code. And they said until recently, nobody wanted to hear about Rust. They said this was a really tough conversation. I would go talk to people. They would say, wait, you have an unsafe keyword. That means we should all write C++ until the heat death of the universe. And now they've all kind of admitted, Rust is actually easier to write code in. You get better code faster. And most large project vulnerabilities are caused by memory corruption because of C. So, I mean, the point is, C has these things that you call strings that are not really sequences of characters. They're just sequences of bytes, which is not the same thing. And they have all these things which you manipulate, which are very hard to understand. And most developers don't really understand them. Whereas in Rust, the things are just what you think they are. And every time you do something dangerous in Rust, like you put more data in than you should, it will just stop and give you an error message. You put in something too big. You overflew a 16-bit integer to it rolled around. It won't do that. It'll just say, that's an error. This is what C will not do. And that's what makes it so much better. You get
Yeah.
informative error messages, you get those errors out of your code, and now you don't have memory corruption. So anyway, I'm glad to see it building up support and acceptance.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got a quick one. We talked a few weeks ago that Facebook turned 20 and Gmail turned 20 April 1st. And the joke is when Gmail first came out on April Fool's Day, people thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah. I was going through the news articles yesterday, and one of them almost fooled me. It's a problem, April 1st. You read things and you say, of course, in politics, it's been this way ever since Trump got in. You say, oh, this has got to be the Onion. And then it turns out to be true.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, Sam, do you still use Gmail?
I do. And I remember until
Yeah.
Gmail, you only had 15 megs for your mail. And Gmail said,
Yeah.
we'll just give you 2 gigs. And it was so great.
Yeah.
Everybody jumped on Gmail as fast as you could, of course.
Yeah. You don't throw away anything. No reason to delete any of your email.
And then I had a friend who filled his whole Gmail account because he would just watch porn and subscribe to everything until it was full of spam. And he actually filled his whole Gmail account. But you really have to try hard to fill your Gmail account.
Well, it's been 20 years and I'm bumping up to 90% limit. I keep getting notifications from Gmail.
Oh.
And I don't really, there's no really good way to clean it out that I've found.
I think I found some way to mass delete old messages or something once years ago.
If you do, you need to share that with me because I can only do a screen at a time and I've tried to research it.
Maybe not. I
And
forget.
yeah, yeah. All right.
Anyway,
What's your next story?
well, remember Elon Musk, his Neuralink announced that they had the first implant where a guy can play video games. And they said there are other alternatives. And Popular Science has one, a story by Andrew Paul. These guys at some college, I wonder if I can find the name of the people that did this, University of Texas Austin researchers have developed a wearable cap that just looks like a cloth helmet with sensors on it, and you can totally accomplish computer tasks straight from your brain. And it takes almost no time to train. They said, in fact, to speed up the training, we made it so you have to play a video game to practice. And then we found you can play 2 video games at the same time with your thoughts while training it. So,
Really?
and it doesn't require any implants into your brain or even you to shave your head or anything. You just wear this thing. It's got what looks like about a dozen electrodes on your scalp. And people can quickly learn to use it. They've trained about a dozen people to use it over a 5-day period. 18 test subjects effectively learned to mentally envision playing both a car racing game and a simple bar balancing program using the new training method. And they're using AI to make the training faster. So anyway, I'm glad to see this. I think we're really rapidly moving towards good wearables. And if there was like some kind of hat you could wear where you could control your computer with your mind, that might be worth doing. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I think getting normal people to have something surgically implanted in their skull is going to be a much harder sell.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an invasive,
Yeah, and
right?
and and
I
also
mean,
I
yeah.
think it sounded a lot better when I first heard it from Sergey Brin 15 years ago, but now the very thought of trusting Elon Musk revolts me. And by the way, they've shown that people that want to consider buying Tesla cars have fallen by about half for that reason. Almost 5 years ago, everybody thought Elon Musk was great. Now a lot of people are very, very reluctant to trust Elon Musk.
Well, he just opened up the EV charging network.
Yeah,
So in theory, he could shut down EV charging. He could shut down Starlink.
like he did in Ukraine.
Yep. Yep.
Well, yeah, and that's why it's another thing they're talking about. And apparently, Silk Road came up a few days ago, and I forget. I used to live on the East Coast, and when I moved to California, after a few years, you forget how they feel about drugs. And the main thing that bothered them, everything Elon Musk did that was rotten, was fine until they found out he was taking ketamine. And now the US government and the East Coast people are very, very, very worried and they need to have an alternative and they can't trust him anymore. I remember this. On the East Coast, they have this belief that if you ever take drugs, you're like permanently insane and we can never be trusted again or something, which is not that much a belief out here in California. But they're super paranoid about it on the East. So that's what bothers them
Really?
is the drugs. Like that's the least. I couldn't care less that he takes ketamine. I care that he's a Nazi, but it's the opposite over there. Anyway,
Speaking of which, I think I caught this headline. I'm not sure it was an April Fool's joke, but did Germany just legalize pot?
I didn't see it.
And in the headline that I saw was big smoke in Berlin.
Well,
So we'll have to research that one.
well, I,
Maybe somebody got me on
well,
that
I
one.
thought most of Europe legalized it long ago, but I guess I don't have any particular information about Germany.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one
But
up.
that
You
could
got
have been
another?
April Fool's. Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, you got some deep fakes.
yeah, so this is an interesting story. So here I'm just fact checking it, and according to AP News, Germany legalized possession of small amounts of cannabis.
Right. I don't know why I thought, I just would assume that happened decades ago. But anyway,
Well, I think Germany is very conservative about that. And, brings to kind of question what other countries have legalized, pot in Europe. I know Middle East, it's pretty
oh,
verboten.
well, actually, no. What I've been told,
No?
in a lot of Middle Eastern countries, hashish is considered fine. It's alcohol that's forbidden
Oh, yeah,
for
alcohol.
disposal. Yeah, yeah.
True.
Which might, as a matter of fact, be more medically logical.
Yeah, that might be true. And the funny thing is in Qatar where the world soccer match was, what was that last year, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, Alcohol there is illegal unless you're staying at a five-star hotel.
Well, typically they have to carve out exceptions for foreigners, or you can't get businessmen to come. So,
Well, this wasn't an exception for foreigners either.
yeah. Anyway,
I'll
what,
leave it at that.
what was
All
it
right.
about the deep fakes?
So here's a really interesting story. Deep fakes are being used in Arizona politics. And the question is, are they being used for the greater good? So let me back up a little bit. And for the primary election in Vermont, a deep fake was used. And I think it was a phone call by President Biden encouraging people to vote for a candidate, something along those
No, I think
lines.
telling him not to vote, tell him
Or,
don't vote
yeah,
in the
yeah,
primary, save your vote for later.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was clearly a deep fake.
Yeah,
And we know that. And I don't know how effective it was. But Kerry Lake, who lost an election in Arizona,
yeah,
who's been complaining about election fraud and that the votes were stolen, voter fraud, all of that,
yep.
has now made a new video telling people, telling voters about deep fakes. The only problem is the video is a deep fake.
Did she actually authorize it or somebody else made it?
I don't think it was authorized. That I don't know.
Because then it wouldn't be exactly a fake. Yeah.
Yeah, then it wouldn't be a deep fake. So now the question becomes, here's is this a good use of deep fakes?
Well, I would say any attempt to fool people is probably not good.
So so this is a question of the greater good of using a deep fake for the greater good.
Well,
So would you use a deep fake to encourage people to go out and vote if it's not for a specific candidate?
I don't see why you'd need a fake for that. I mean, but
I'm just,
I mean, I
I'm
just,
just asking.
well, it's just like advertising, you know, the whole, when you talk about the greater good, you're suggesting that you do something bad because you'll accomplish more good with it. And you think of like making a deep fake of like Donald Trump telling people to take the vaccine or something. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
this is where you get in dirty politics.
yeah.
The main place I've heard of this is not yet using deep fakes, so it's very close, is the many Democratic candidates now spend their money on ads to promote the more extreme right-wing candidate. And so because I think it'll be easier to beat. And they say this is a really dangerous game because that guy might win, and then you've made the world worse. But I remember the Michael Steele, the previous head of the Democratic Party, came on and said, "There's nothing wrong with this. You're just telling the truth. The Democratic Party will put out commercials saying, 'Look at this guy. He's just like Donald Trump. He lied about this. He lied about the vaccines. Don't vote for him,' when they know that's going to make more Republicans vote for him." And they planned it, but technically all they're doing is saying the truth about the guy.
Yeah. I received a number of postcards from a candidate in the California primary, and none of them were in support of the candidate. It was kind of leading you to a certain point and then allowing you to draw a conclusion, which is don't vote for this guy.
Yeah. Well, that I think has been the
It's been
trouble is
used.
the negative campaigning. I mean, that's why
Yeah.
almost everybody doesn't vote for anybody anymore. They vote against the other guy.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not healthy. That means none of us are very happy with the system.
And do you know when that began? There was one point in politics.
No, I don't.
It was the Daisy commercial that I think LBJ ran. And it was a young girl, like 3, 4-year-old girl picking daisies. And she was pulling the petals off of a daisy. And the camera zooms in on her eye, and you see a nuclear bomb explode. And I think it was, and now was LBJ running against McGovern? I
Uh,
don't recall, but whoever the candidate was, it was implied. Do you trust that guy with nuclear warheads? You better not trust LBJ.
yeah, well,
And it's my understanding from what I was taught that that commercial only aired once because people were so outraged by that. Prior to that ad, the commercials that people ran were things like "I like Ike"
yeah.
and "I support." It was all in support of your candidate. It was never something negative or against your candidate.
Yeah, well, you know, I saw another one. Did you see the Yul Brynner ad about smoking? Because that also ran only once because it was so terrifying. And I saw it because he was really famous. He was in The King and I. He was this famous
Yep.
actor, and he had one commercial. All he did was he said, "I'm Yul Brynner. Whatever you do, don't smoke." And then he died of lung cancer. And by the time they played it, he said, "By the time you see this, I'll be dead. Whatever you do, don't smoke." Because he'd made all these
Wow.
movies of him smoking, and it was terrifying. And they only played it once because people were so upset. But you know, it
So,
was pretty good. But he was sort of apologizing for glamorizing smoking in all his movies.
well, that was common in the 50s, 60s, right? To
Even
have
now.
smoking. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, during World War II, cigarettes were given to the servicemen for free,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But you know, I saw something. I was watching a old TV show on Amazon, and they were smoking these cigarettes called Morleys. And I looked it up. The cigarettes are all fake on TV sets. Remember in this UFO show that had this smoking man who was always smoking? There's this special brand called Morley's after Marlboros, and they're not tobacco. They're like herbal and stuff. But everybody's smoking on set, they're smoking these fake cigarettes. And in some of the shows, they even make a big deal of letting you see the Morley brand.
Oh, is
Um,
that right?
it's the particular brand of fake cigarettes they use on movie sets, which I hope
Well,
are less harmful to your health. I don't know, but they are not tobacco, apparently.
yeah, I wonder if they produce more smoke.
I would
So, yeah,
so you have more smoke. That's the point. Yeah.
yeah. And, it's kind of interesting. There's a whole industry in Hollywood, or in the entertainment business, of creating fake food that's
Yeah.
used, like ice cream,
Yeah.
in camera shots, or fake license plates, fake brands.
Yeah.
fake newspapers, all that. There's an entire industry that's
Make,
around that.
yeah. Making things look right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Make things look right on camera.
Yeah, you can't use an actual brand because you've got a copyright infringement and a logo issue, right? If you use an actual product or use product placement. So you have to use something that's similar, like
Right.
Morley's.
And
Yeah.
often it's just so that it looks better. Like I remember I saw some movie where they said when you're looking at pornography, if it looks good, that's because it's fake. If it was real, it would look like garbage. Because theater is all about makeup and lighting and angles and stuff. It
Yeah, exactly.
makes
And
something.
multiple takes.
It's Tinseltown. Making things look good is a whole different thing than like documenting what really happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. What's next for you, Sam? What do you
I got
got for
I
us?
just got one more, which
One more.
Google has this incognito mode in Chrome. Well,
Right.
and I use incognito mode because it doesn't have the cookies. So if you've logged in and you want to see something as if you're not logged in, or if you've used up your number of free trial views and you want more free trials, you just open incognito mode and it won't have the cookie. But apparently, all along, Google has been collecting data exactly the same from those incognito pages, and they got sued for that. And they've admitted that's all true. We blocked other people from using cookies, but we just continue to use our cookies and record everything you do in incognito mode. And then they said, we can't possibly delete that data. And now they've said, all right, we'll delete that data. They're going to delete that data and they're going but they didn't give any money to the people for damages for this. So anyway, they made a settlement. They're going to delete the data and they're supposedly going to stop surreptitiously collecting user data worth, by Google's own estimate, billions of dollars. So I didn't know that, but I never did know exactly what incognito mode did. And apparently it's sort of more sinister than you thought.
Yeah. So do we know anything about Firefox's what is their Masquerade?
They've
I
all
think is
got
what yeah, they've all got a
Edge
mode.
has it. And I haven't seen, I would imagine there'll be lawsuits coming for them if they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't think any of them are ad tracking giants like Microsoft or Mozilla. So I doubt they continue keeping their own data, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Good
I
point.
don't think Microsoft does targeted ads either. That's all. Remember, they used to have commercials. So that was the great thing about Microsoft Mail. They're not spying on your email the way Gmail does.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, but they're not, they don't sell advertising. So logically,
Microsoft?
I don't think they do. At least they didn't a few years ago. So they
Bing?
could take the unusual position of the moral high ground. We're not
Yeah.
spying on you and exploiting you the way Google does.
Yeah, but that's what Bing is all about. Search engine.
Well, is it ad
It's
supported?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know now Microsoft puts ads on the Windows desktop and in the start menu and everything. So maybe they are doing it now, but maybe like back in the days of XP, I don't think they were doing much targeting advertising, but I don't know.
I well, that's when did Bing come about? That was in XP days, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. That's when
Yeah.
Bill Gates standing on stage saying, we are going to make a better search engine than Google in 9 months. And the whole world has started laughing and has never stopped laughing since. I mean, I still apologize for my students. Say, if you go to the start menu and you look for a program that is installed, it can't find it because Microsoft can't make a search engine that can search the start menu. It really is pathetic.
It is. I would
It's just
agree.
amazing how much they can't do it. Every company has these blind spots. Like Google can't make a social network. They tried many times. It was just a complete disaster. Every company has certain things they can do and certain blind spots. They just can't do it at all.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, Google is just shutting down their podcast or
Yeah.
their podcatcher,
Well, yeah,
right?
obviously, why bother with it? I mean, obviously other people have got that going.
Yeah,
Google
yeah,
has a ton of these experimental projects they just give up on after a while.
yeah,
They
yeah.
somehow
Well,
they
yeah,
manage to conceal it more. Microsoft will blast out products, and 3 out of 4 of them are god awful disasters, and then one's a hit. Google does the same thing, but somehow they manage to conceal the disasters more, so they don't. It's not as obvious that like 3/4 of their projects fail.
yeah. Do you remember the phone for kids that Microsoft came out with,
Kin,
or the
I think, or something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
phone
the
for
kid,
kids. They
yeah,
actually manufactured it, shipped it to the market, and 6 weeks later said, "Oh, forget it."
yeah.
And they had a lot of products like that.
But then who was it that tried to go up against, I think it was Netflix or Disney. The woman from HP who ran
Probably
for
Fiorina.
office. Yeah, I think I think they backed like $1 billion to try and go against a streaming service,
Uh,
and that lasted about a month or two.
yeah, a bunch of, I remember the old Microsoft phone. I couldn't believe it.
Oh
They
yeah,
the phone, and I said, well, of course it'll integrate with Active Directory, and they're going to go into BlackBerry and make it your business phone. And they said, no. I said, well, then what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? You had a market right there, which would
yeah,
have worked. Instead, you decided to go against Apple for the home market, which is never going to work. And
insane.
it didn't work. I
Yeah,
mean, why do you punch your enemy where they're strong? The whole point of Apple is they don't integrate with Active Directory, so they're miserable for your business phone. Microsoft had a opening there. They failed to ask me, you know?
yeah, and I'll tell you, they had a really nice Nokia phone with
Yeah,
a very large screen. This is before iPhone days,
yeah.
and it was readable, it was easy, it was very functional. I had one of those. I really liked that phone until support ended.
And even the later Microsoft phone, the people that had it said it was really nice and they liked it, but it never got anywhere in the market because it wasn't better than the iPhone and it wasn't cheaper than the Android, and it needed to have one of those advantages.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I just came across an article. I'm not sure when this happened, but an original iPhone in a sealed box was sold at auction. Did you catch that?
No, but sounds like a good collector's item.
Yeah, I think it sold for just shy of $200,000.
That's what
Brand
I
new in the
think.
box, never opened.
Sure, just like an original comic book or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know some of the games, I can't remember, Nintendo games, still sealed in a box. The
Yeah.
early versions before it started to go into mass market are selling for over $1 million.
Yeah,
So
well,
how that can be, I don't understand.
this I think is essentially Donald Trump stock in his media company is essentially the same kind of collector's item. It has no actual intrinsic worth, but it gets bid up just because people think it's cool to have.
Yeah, yeah. All right, that's it for me. Do you have any
Yeah.
others?
No, that's it for me too.
So
So,
we join you on Friday, huh?
yep, another one on Friday.
Sounds good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.